Okay, everybody. Hi, Devers. How's everybody? That was actually a pretty good hello. We are here with Christina today. Christina, I'm going to butcher your last name, so I prefer if you pronounce it.
Yeah, Cacioppo.
Cacioppo. And you're going to talk to us about coding. You taught yourself how to code, correct? And my friend Libby is our common friend. She works at Facebook now, and she hooked us up. And I'm going to just turn it over to you so I don't bore the crap out of everyone.
Sure. What would you like me to talk about?
Well, so we learned HTML in our first week. We learned CSS in our second week, and now we're learning JavaScript. So anything that you want to talk about, learning how to code, your story. I'm really curious to hear how you got into this and how you got into tech and how you taught yourself how to code.
Definitely. About how long should I take?
We've got a half an hour, so whatever works best for you.
Okay, sounds good.
Excellent.
Hi guys. Getting a little seasick. Okay. Nice to talk to you. So I'll say a few things, and then if anybody's got questions, like I guess shout them out because I can't quite see enough people to call on you. But like if something comes up, just ask me a question. You don't have to wait till the end. So I suppose to start. So in college, I studied economics and very much liked it, and took a few programming classes, but not very many. And then after college, had a few jobs, and kind of through that, I sort of realized that both kind of programmers have kind of neat abilities, right? Like you can think of this idea, but then if you're kind of at least a bit of a programmer, you can go and make some version of it. And so you could like make some app or make some website, and it like doesn't have to be the best app or website in the world, but you can go ahead and make it and like get people to use it, and then people use something you make. And I thought that was super cool. And I kind of decided, okay, well I want to do that basically. And so just kind of started coding. I guess I was probably at a similar stage to where you guys are, and that I kind of knew enough to like be able to do some simple things, and kind of it was really though enough to be able to figure out how to do other things. And I just kind of started, and so every day I'd get up and I'd go to my friend's office, and I was trying to make a website at the time, so I could track which books I read and which books my friends were reading, because I really like to read, and I was curious kind of what books my friends were reading, because that's where you hear about the best books, right? It's not like in the newspaper or whatever. Anyway, so I just kind of got up every day and tried to make this website, and like some days were better than others, and sometimes things worked a little better than others. But in general, it was kind of this exercise in just not getting too frustrated, I suppose. Like I think the way teaching yourself to code is hard is because you get really frustrated sometimes when you're coding, especially if you don't know what to do, right? But it's not, that's kind of the only way in which it's hard, right? Like the internet's amazing, and there's all sorts of information on the internet, and if you want to figure out how to do something, you can go look it up, and like it took me at least a while to understand what some of like the web pages are trying to tell me. But like the information's all there, and so you really just have to like, or for me, I just had to like stick with it, and it kind of did get better, right? Every day or every week, I like understood a little bit more, and then I'd go and be able to look back at old things I'd written and been like, oh, that's really bad, I should fix that. And so that's kind of the crux of it, was just kind of sticking with it. And I suppose since then, so I've made a few websites. I made this book site. I made a changelog website, so you could keep track of, kind of like a blog, like keep track of what you did each day, which I actually found really helpful as I was learning to code, because I mentioned it got really frustrating. And then at various points when I could look back and be like, oh, well, it was frustrating today, but like, man, last week I was like frustrated over something else that I totally know how to do now. Isn't that great? And then I suppose I made an Android app with a friend of mine. And it's a video messaging app. It's called Hoot. If any of you have Android phones, it's in the App Store. And it has a little owl with who kind of winks at you and blinks at you, and the owl's he comes alive a little bit. And I suppose right now I'm working on kind of the website I wanted when I was learning how to code. So I'm trying to make the thing that I think would have made learning to code for me much easier. And that's kind of what I spend my days on now. I kind of either work on that website or I tutor people, like kind of students using that website. Not because I think, or like hopefully like at some point I will be able to just be like, oh, just go to this website. Like, you don't need me to tutor you. Like the website will be fine. But right now it's so early. Sometimes it's really helpful to tutor using the website, and so then I learn like what makes sense, what doesn't, what's totally not clear, that sort of thing. So that's the like super fast overview of kind of what I've been doing. I'd be curious from you guys, like both kind of if you have any questions about that, but then also as you guys have been learning how to code, what sorts of things have I guess what sorts of opinions have you changed, right? Like, what are some things that you maybe believed, 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago before you started learning HTML and CSS and JavaScript, but now that you've learned some, you kind of don't believe anymore, or vice versa? Anyone have anything they'd like to share? Yeah.
You'll have to speak a lot louder.
I thought that I wanted to make video games.
Can you hear him?
No.
So if you want to ask questions, I think you have to come within like a 10-foot radius of the mic.
I thought that I wanted to make video games.
Uh-huh.
Thought. How many other
So, I mean, what has changed? Why do you no longer think you want to make video games?
No,
or?
I recognize the difficulty in it now. And I realize that it's as much a science as it is an art.
Uh-huh.
Anyone else's opinions change on anything? Or code has basically been always what you thought it was, regardless of how much you learned? I will bribe you with candy. That's always the deal with guest speakers. You know that. Yeah. Who says he thought it would be a lot harder than he initially.
Yeah, me too. And you kind of realize that, like, I mean, I think, or this is one of the things I don't like about the way, this is my kind of soapbox, but I don't like about the way a lot of computer science and programming is taught, is it's often couched in this, like, oh, this is so hard, and you have to be a math genius to be really great at it, and, like, if you don't like math, like, you probably won't like programming, right? And I just, like, think that none of that is true. I mean, at some point programming involves math, but that's like if you're doing like very particular kind of things. If you're making a website, you don't have to be great at math. You don't have to love math unless you're making a math website, right? And yeah, at some point, like, people go to school for like a decade to learn like really advanced computer science things. But again, you don't need really advanced computer science things to make an Android app and to do kind of many things. So like, just like anything else, like programming gets hard at some point, but in the beginning, it's the beginning, right? It's like not, it's hard because you kind of don't quite understand what's going on, but once you get that, like, okay. Like, it's just like playing, tennis or something, right? Like, in the beginning, tennis is confusing, and then you learn how to, like, swing a racket, and then you're like, okay, it's a little better. And then, like, yeah, if you're at Wimbledon, like, that's hard. But there's many ways to play tennis that are not at Wimbledon. And I kind of think the same is with programming.
Do you mind if we open it up to questions?
Absolutely.
Do you guys have any questions, Christina? About her career, how she got where she is? Maybe... It's a tough crowd today.
Yeah. I suppose, I don't know how interesting this is. Before I started programming, I worked at a venture capital firm in New York. So that's an investment firm, like a finance firm, and it gives money to people starting, well, it invests in people starting really early kind of internet companies, so either websites or mobile apps. So like it gave money to like guys who started Twitter back in 2007 when Twitter was just getting started, or like the guys in New York who started Foursquare when they were just starting Foursquare. And that was kind of a neat job because you get to meet, right, the guys who are starting Twitter when they're starting Twitter, and then you realize, like, they're just totally normal guys, and it's a pretty cool idea, right, but otherwise it's like, yeah, and you kind of spend your day interacting with those sorts of people, which is really neat. for me, that kind of convinced me, like, oh, I'd rather kind of be one of those people and fund them by giving money. But if any of you are kind of curious about venture capital or startups, I'm happy to talk about that too.
I'm curious, what kind of career path things took you to venture capitalism? So was it what you studied, or like how did you make the connections to get involved with that?
Yeah, it was a little scattershot. So no, so I suppose I went to, so I studied economics in college, which I really liked, and I thought I wanted to be an economics professor. And then basically at the very end, I decided, maybe not. Being an econ professor would be interesting, but there's lots of other things to do. And then I did a master's degree in design. And I guess that was a bit of a kind of interesting combination, right, of economics and design, which is like most people don't do much of. And I kind of had a design job and then found this venture capital firm in New York. It's called Union Square Ventures. Anyway, and they wrote a blog post saying, hey, if you're interested in like working with us, send us some links to your web presence. And I read that blog post and was like, what? What do you mean? Like, who hired this? But did send them some links. I sent them like a link to my Twitter account and my blog and a travel site I liked, and I think maybe some photos, like Flickr. That's when Flickr was around. Anyway, and they read my blog, and they were like, "Oh, she seems interesting, I guess." And so they asked me to like come in and then do a more formal interview, and that's how I got the job. It was a little scattered. Yeah.
How long did you work for them?
2 years.
Anybody got questions? I guess we might just kind of wrap it up a little bit early.
Okay, I guess I have one more question, if that's all right. Or
yeah, we have a question over here.
Cool.
So you'll have to speak up really loud, or you'll have to come closer to the mic.
How was it making your first app? Was it fun, hard?
Yeah, it was. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Was it confusing or even?
Yeah, so it was all of those things. It was fun and hard and really confusing, and it took like a week or two probably just to actually figure out like how apps work. They don't work like websites. It is a little different, and it's not that it's really harder either. It's just different, and I hadn't seen it before. But kind of the nice thing about an app, right, is like as you're making something, you can literally like go grab your friend's phone or go grab your mom's phone and install your app, and then they use it, and like that's really cool. And so that's probably what like helped me kind of keep going a little bit.
I've got another question.
Yeah.
See yourself, some infinite screens maybe. There we go. What's up?
What was your favorite out of the three categories of, like, I guess, programming? Like HTML, CSS?
Yeah, so, favorite. Probably JavaScript. It's like kind of trickier, right? Or it can be somewhat, like, sometimes really tricky and confusing, I find it. But it's so satisfying, too, right? When you, like, make it something on the page that moves and changes and, like, this thing going, and like, you know, you click a button and then like you can make the button disappear and like a balloon pop up out of it. Like you kind of something like that. I find it satisfying. What have you liked?
Probably HTML.
Yeah? Why is that?
I'm not exactly sure why. It's just when we started it felt comfortable, I guess.
Spin one more time.
Yep.
There's one thing you could have had when you were learning programming forward, like it would have helped.
Wait, sorry, one more time.
If there's one thing that would have helped you learn programming like easier or faster, what would it be?
Totally. So, I'm trying to do this. Easier way to look things up. Like, you know when you and you're like, oh, how do I like the for loop through an array in JavaScript? Like, what's the right syntax again? How do I do it like that? And I mean, they're kind of silly questions, right? But it's like you memorize only by using it. And I would have loved to have like a really quick lookup for that sort of thing, right? Where you're like, oh, I want a for loop, and just like, what's the predicate? Because one thing I've also noticed as I've kind of been teaching people now, like, if you know something but can't remember it, you kind of feel like you're like, oh, I should know that, and like, this is frustrating. And it just doesn't, it shouldn't be that frustrating. What about you? What would you like?
It was really nice having James.
One more time.
It was really nice having someone like James to tell you.
Got it. Yeah.
That was scripted.
That was it, completely unprompted. I did not ask for that kind of. Anybody else got questions, or do you have any more questions for us?
Yeah, so I'd be curious what you guys want to, or like what you might want to do now that you can make websites. Like, what will you do with your HTML and CSS and JavaScript knowledge?
If no one raises their hand, I'm going to call on people. We've got one. I don't know if I'm pointing this in the right direction. Sweet.
Personally, I'm going to use it for organization.
For organization with his school projects.
Got it. Cool.
My older brother set up that my brother and sister and I can make up web pages over the intra or Ethernet. Using the internet. So I'm going to be making web pages just
Cool.
show on there.
Yep.
I'm going to find some way to make money.
Some way to make money.
Pretty good.
That bottom line.
What does the world need? Like, who are your customers? Who will your customers be?
The tough questions. All right, we'll go to someone else on what they are building websites for, and you can think about what your potential customer is. Anybody else? What you're going to use this stuff for in your future?
Convenience.
Convenience.
I'm not totally sure of this, but I sort of want to make a website, or not a website, but like a video game that I like. So like mix of strategy and stuff like that.
Okay.
For me, it's just a hobby, but I might potentially use it for my main extracurriculars for a horribly designed website. They need a new one.
I feel you.
I
would use it to make an app.
Sweet.
What sort of app?
I don't know, good one.
Bad one?
So we want to make money and we want to make apps, but we don't really know who our customer is. And what's that? Your age? Cool.
My customers would be anyone who wants the app.
Depends on what the app is.
I'm going to try, see if I can get this level again. Great. Well, I think we are going to sign off and get started for today. But thank you so much. Everyone, a round of applause for Christina, please. If we have follow-up answers to some of your questions or follow-up questions to your presentation, I will get in touch with Justin and kind of send those questions along, if that's all right.
That'd be great.
All right, thank you so much.
For sure.
It was very nice to meet you.
You too. Have fun. Good afternoon, guys.
So,
That's it.